I found something terrifying in an old book. Could it be the Satanic Bible? It started with boredom, I guess. Pure, unadulterated, soul-crushing boredom. Laid off from my job at the Historical Society, drowning in student loan debt, and with absolutely nothing to do but stare at the peeling paint in my apartment. Sarah, my girlfriend, bless her heart, was working double shifts at the hospital. She kept telling me to get out, do something, anything. That's how I ended up at Crowley's Curiosities. Crowley's was a relic, a dark, dusty used bookstore crammed into a forgotten corner of town. The kind of place that smelled like mildew and regret. Mr. Crowley himself was even more of a relic. Stooped with eyes that seemed to absorb light, he always seemed to be watching you, even when he wasn't looking. I usually stuck to the history section, but that day I wandered further back into a dimly lit alcove filled with books that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. That's where I found it. It was tucked away on the bottom shelf, almost hidden. A thick leather-bound volume, its cover worn smooth with age. There were no markings, no title, nothing to indicate what it was. It just sat there. An oppressive weight seemed to emanate from it. I picked it up. The leather was cold and dry, and the book felt heavier than it should have. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded. I flipped it open. What I saw made my stomach clench. Strange symbols filled the pages. Geometric shapes intertwined with bizarre figures, things that looked like distorted animals and grotesque humanoids. There were diagrams of rituals, accompanied by text in a language I didn't recognize. It was unsettling, disturbing, but undeniably fascinating. Mr. Crowley emerged from the shadows. "Find something interesting, Daniel?" His voice was a low rasp. I don't know what it is," I said, still staring at the open page. "Do you?" He just smiled, a slow, unsettling smile. "Some things are better left undiscovered, but curiosity is a powerful thing, isn't it?" He named a price that was ridiculously low, almost as if he wanted to get rid of it. I paid him without haggling, feeling a strange sense of urgency. Back at my apartment, I started researching. I scanned pages, searching for any recognizable symbols or languages. I posted images on obscure online forums dedicated to occult texts and forgotten lore. Most of the responses were dismissive, someone suggesting it was a hoax, a prop from a bad movie. But a few were different. One user with the handle Azathoth77 wrote, "Be careful with that. Some things are meant to stay buried." He didn't elaborate. Another grimoire seeker asked for more detailed images, then abruptly stopped responding. The symbols themselves were a puzzle. They seemed to be a mixture of different traditions, some reminiscent of ancient Sumerian glyphs, others with a more Celtic or Norse influence. But there were elements that were completely unique, something darker. As the days turned into weeks, I became increasingly obsessed. I neglected my job search, skipped meals, and barely slept. Sarah grew worried. "Daniel, you need to stop," she said one evening, her voice laced with concern. "This is consuming you. You haven't left the apartment in days. You look awful." "I'm close, Sarah," I said, my eyes glued to the book. "I'm almost there. I think I'm starting to understand it." "Understand what? Some crazy old book? It's just a book, Daniel. It's not worth your sanity." Her words stung, but I couldn't stop. The book had taken hold of me. It was like an addiction, a compulsion I couldn't resist. Then the nightmares started. They were vivid, terrifying. I saw myself standing in a dark, desolate landscape, surrounded by chanting figures. The sky was a swirling vortex of crimson and black, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. In the center of the scene, a monstrous figure rose from the earth, its eyes burning with malevolent intent. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The waking visions were worse. Flickers of movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that danced in the corners of my eyes. Whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, telling me things I didn't want to hear. I started to feel like I was being watched. I knew I needed help. I remembered Professor Armitage, a retired professor of religious studies from the local college. I'd taken his class on comparative mythology years ago, and he'd always seemed to have a deep knowledge of the occult. I found his address and drove to his house, a ramshackle Victorian mansion overflowing with books and strange artifacts. Professor Armitage was initially skeptical. He listened to my story with a weary expression, dismissing it as the product of an overactive imagination. But when I showed him the book, his demeanor changed. He put on his spectacles and examined it closely, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I told him about Crowley's Curiosities. He didn't seem surprised. This is not something to be taken lightly, Daniel," he said, his voice grave. "I've seen things like this before. Fragments of forbidden knowledge. Texts that should have remained lost." He identified some of the symbols as belonging to various ancient cults, but confirmed that much of the book was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. "There's a reason these things are hidden, Daniel. Some doors are better left unopened." He warned me about the dangers of delving too deep, about the potential for psychological harm, even something worse. But I couldn't stop. I was too far gone. I pressed him for more information, and he reluctantly agreed to help me, but only under strict conditions. No rituals, no incantations, just academic research. He told me about a series of unsolved disappearances that had plagued the town in the late 19th century. People vanishing without a trace, leaving behind no clues. There were rumors of a secret society, a cult that practiced dark rituals in the woods outside of town. I found a passage in the book that seemed to describe a similar ritual, a ceremony involving human sacrifice. The symbols matched. That's when the feeling of being watched intensified. I would catch glimpses of a figure lurking in the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with eyes that burned like coals. One night I couldn't sleep. The nightmares were getting worse, the waking visions more frequent. I felt a compulsion, an irresistible urge to open the book and read. I found a section describing a simple ritual, a prayer to a being whose name I couldn't pronounce. It promised knowledge, power, enlightenment. I knew it was a mistake, but I couldn't resist. I gathered the necessary materials, a black candle, a bowl of salt, a piece of parchment. I drew the symbols from the book on the floor with chalk. I lit the candle, and the room filled with a flickering, unnatural light. I began to chant the words from the book, the foreign syllables rolling off my tongue. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. Suddenly, the candle flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. A cold wind swept through the apartment, rattling the windows. Then I heard it, a voice whispering in my ear. It wasn't human. It was something else, something ancient and malevolent. It spoke in a language I didn't understand, but I knew what it meant. It wanted me. I screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over the table. I scrambled for the light switch, but my hand brushed against something cold and slimy. I screamed again and ran out of the apartment, leaving the book behind. I spent the night in my car, shivering with fear. When I finally returned in the morning, the apartment was empty. The chalk symbols were gone, the candle extinguished. The book was still there, lying on the floor as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. I told Sarah everything. She was terrified. She begged me to get rid of the book, to go to the police, to seek professional help. I knew she was right, but I couldn't let go. I felt like I was on the verge of understanding something profound, something that would change everything. I reached out to Professor Armitage again. He was horrified by what I had done. "You've opened a door you can't close, Daniel," he said, his voice trembling. "You've attracted attention." He told me more about the book's history, its origins shrouded in mystery and whispered rumors. It was said to be a gateway to another realm, a conduit for dark forces. He believed it was a version of something long thought destroyed, a twisted sibling to the Key of Solomon. Destroy it, Daniel, burn it, bury it, anything before it destroys you, but it was too late. The shadowy figure started appearing more frequently, no longer just in my peripheral vision. I saw it standing across the street, watching me from the shadows. I saw it in my dreams, its eyes burning into my soul. I went back to Crowley's Curiosities, hoping to return the book to find some answers, but the store was gone. The building was empty, the windows boarded up. There was no sign that it had ever existed. I was alone. I tried to destroy the book. I threw it in the fire, but it wouldn't burn. I smashed it with a hammer, but it wouldn't break. I buried it in the woods, but it reappeared on my doorstep the next morning. The book was indestructible. The police started asking questions. Detective Miller, a gruff, world-weary cop, was investigating a series of strange occurrences in the town, unexplained noises, reports of shadowy figures, and a general sense of unease. He suspected I was involved. "We found your name connected to some very strange online forums, Mr. Ward, forums that discuss disturbing things." He didn't believe my story, of course. He thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. Sarah tried to help, but she was out of her depth. She couldn't understand what I was going through. The book was driving a wedge between us. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't watch you destroy yourself. I'm scared of you." She left. I was completely alone. The shadowy figure was getting closer. I could feel its presence, its cold, malevolent energy. It was waiting for me patiently, like a predator stalking its prey. I knew it was coming for the book. I decided to confront it. I didn't know what else to do. I waited for it in my apartment, the book clutched tightly in my hands. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with a palpable sense of dread. The door creaked open. The figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light. It was taller than I remembered, its features gaunt and distorted. Its eyes burned like coals, filled with an ancient, unholy light. It reached out its hand. The book it rasped, its voice like the grating of stone. "Give it to me." I held it tighter. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "I won't let you have it." It smiled, a slow, cruel smile. "You have no choice." It lunged at me. I don't remember what happened next. Everything became a blur of motion and chaos. I remember the feeling of cold, bony fingers gripping my arm, the searing pain in my head, the chanting voice that echoed in my mind. I woke up in a hospital bed. Sarah was there, her eyes red and swollen. "You're safe now, Daniel," she said, her voice soft. "You're going to be okay." The doctors said I had suffered a mental breakdown. They said I had been hallucinating, that the book was just a trigger for my underlying anxieties. They didn't believe me about the shadowy figure, about the rituals, about the voice. They said it was all in my head, but I knew it wasn't. The book was gone. I don't know what happened to it. Maybe the figure took it. Maybe the police confiscated it. Maybe it vanished on its own. But I know it's still out there somewhere, waiting to be found, waiting to corrupt someone else. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear the voice whispering in my ear. I can still feel the presence of the shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, and I know that it will never truly leave me. I sometimes think I see Mr. Crowley just at the edge of a crowd, or stepping into a cab that drives away before I can get to it. It probably is just my mind playing tricks on me. But it is probably best that I leave this town and try to start again somewhere new. Maybe I will move to a desert or other place that has no used bookstores.